Hello IP6 and welcome to this week's class. Okay, so we've learned about two different systems so far in this chapter, and today we're moving on to a third system. So the first one we learned was the reproductive system, the second one was the circulatory system, and now this is the respiratory system. Okay, and respiratory is basically our breathing system. Okay, our breathing system. So, if you can open on page 13, please, and please follow me whilst I read. The respiratory system provides an area for the exchange of gases between the blood and the environment. Okay, so the respiratory system provides an area for the exchange of gases between the blood and the environment. Exchange means going from one to the other. So, basically, blood needs to get gases like oxygen, okay? And the environment is basically your whole body, okay? That's basically what that means. Okay, so let's just have a look at what the respiratory system looks like. So at the top you can see we have the nasal cavity, okay? That's your nose, nasal cavity. And then you have the trachea, which is your throat. Then you have your left lung, your right lung, and they are protected by your ribs. Okay, so the ribs are there not to actually protect your heart. A lot of people think the ribs are there to protect your heart, but the ribs actually protect your lungs, okay, your lungs. So we obviously have two lungs, left lung and right lung. And then within our lungs, we have bronchus and bronchiole, okay? And within the bronchus and bronchiole, we also have the alveolus and capillaries, okay? So I would like you to draw and label these, because this often comes up as a question in your health exams to label, in particular, this, okay? The inside of the lungs. And you'll have to remember bronchus at the top, then your bronchiole, then your alveolus, and finally your capillaries. So we can see the difference between the alveolus and the capillaries. The alveolus are white and the capillaries are darker or red, okay? So it's important that you do remember that. Okay. In our respiratory system, the trachea branches into two bronchi, which continue to branch out into bronchioles and end up in tiny air sacs known as alveoli. Okay, so after we have breathed it in and the air has gone down through our trachea, it goes into our lungs, which is something called the bronchi, okay? After that then, it goes into different sacs, and the different sacs are known as alveoli, which is the alveolus up here, okay? They're the different sacs. When we inhale or breathe in, the air enters our nostrils, flows along the trachea, through the bronchi, then the bronchioles, and finally into the alveoli. So that's the full system that it takes. When we exhale or breathe out, the air from the alveoli moves into the bronchioles, then the bronchi, along the trachea, and finally passes out through the nostrils. So as you may have noticed, that is the reverse of when we breathe in. So we breathe in, it goes in through our nostrils, flows along the trachea, through the bronchi, down into the bronchioles, and finally into the alveoli. And then when we breathe out, it goes the opposite. It goes from the alveoli into the bronchi, up through the trachea, and finally out through the nostrils. Okay, so that is how we breathe in and breathe out. That is where the air that we breathe in goes to, and when we breathe out, that's how it makes its way back out. Okay, so let's have a look at this exchange of gases in the alveolus. So this is the air sac, okay, the alveoli, the air sac. This is what it looks like. And as you can see, blood enters one side, it goes down around and comes exit the other side. Within, so as you can see here also, the air comes in and air goes out. So this is like your lung. It's like a sack full of air, and around it you have blood that goes around it, okay? And there's a wall. This is called a wall, and it's about a cell thick. So there's a thin layer of moisture, and then you have red blood cells and capillaries within that wall, okay? All right, so you don't need to remember this. I will never ask you about this. This is just to give you an idea of what it looks like, okay? So just to continue with the questions that you have to put into your books as usual. So the first question is, what is the respiratory system? So the first sentence will answer that for you of that page, okay? Then draw and label the respiratory system. So please try to remember that as you draw it. And then question, how does air reach the alveoli from the nostrils? So starts at the nostrils, how does it get to the alveoli? Second question, how does air exit from the alveoli? Okay, breathe in, breathe out. That is what the question is asking you. Okay, next page, 14. In the alveolus, the exchange of gases takes place. The oxygen in the inhaled air enters the blood vessel through the wall of the alveoli. So if I just go back here, you can see this is the alveoli, and the air passes through it. Okay, that's the exchange of gases. Oxygen is a gas, so that's how it goes through. In the meantime, the carbon dioxide in the blood vessels enters the alveoli and is extended out of the lungs. So basically when we breathe in, we're breathing in fresh air. That air is then circulated around through our body, which we learnt already, and then when it gets back, makes its whole way around, it comes back in as carbon dioxide, and then we need to exhale that from our body, okay? And you got to remember that the alveoli is the last place that the oxygen that we breathe in goes to. It then makes its way around through the whole body, goes back into the alveoli, and then makes its way back up through our trachea and out through our nostrils again when we breathe out, okay? Very complicated, but if you just remember the order that you breathe in and you breathe out, it should make it much, much easier, okay? So how do we breathe? Breathing consists of two phases: inhalation, taking in air, and exhalation, letting out air. So we know these: inhale, exhale, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, okay? Very, very easy. So let's have a look at this diagram. So air enters our lungs, we can see that, air is going in. Our ribs and sternum rise. So when we breathe in, we're filling up our lungs with air. So our chest gets bigger because our lungs are full of air. So they expand, they're blowing up. It's like a balloon. If you put air into a balloon, it gets bigger. And that's what happens when we breathe in. So then our diaphragm actually goes up. When we breathe in, our diaphragm pushes our lungs up as well. So if you put your hands on the end of your rib cage and you breathe in as much as you can, so 1, 2, 3, can you feel the diaphragm pushing up and out from underneath your ribs? Okay, so that's protecting our lungs there as well. When we inhale, the rib cage moves upwards and outwards, while the diaphragm muscles contracts. This increases the volume of the lungs and airflow into the lungs. Okay, so that's just like I explained. You can tell, it's very, very obvious. All you need to do is breathe in. You can feel your chest getting bigger because your lungs have gotten bigger. The rib cage comes out, and your diaphragm underneath the rib cage, that also contracts and comes out as well. And you can just put your hand underneath your rib cage, and when you breathe in, you will feel that. And then let's look at how the air exits. So air is coming out, so you're exhaling. And if you do the same thing, you'll feel that your lungs are getting smaller, your rib cage gets smaller, and your diaphragm returns back to normal. Okay? So let's a bit more detail. When we exhale, the rib cage moves downwards and inwards while the diaphragm muscles relaxes. This decreases the volume of the lungs and air and is forced out of the lungs. So basically we're exhaling, the rib cage moves back down, squeezes your lungs a little bit because your diaphragm muscles have relaxed, and then when we exhale, we can feel the air coming out of our lungs. So, how do we keep our respiratory system healthy? So we've learned how to keep our reproductive system healthy, our circulatory system healthy. Now it's time for our respiratory system. So number 1, stay in the open as much as possible to get enough clean oxygen. So fresh air, very good for you. Do not wear clothes that are too tight, as this may cause breathing difficulties. So if you wear clothes that are too tight, especially a top that's too tight, when you try to breathe in, your lungs will be restricted how much they can intake air. So you need to make sure that your clothes are not too tight, that they're a little bit loose, so that when you breathe in, your lungs can expand to as much as they need to. Okay? 3, keep your body warm during cold weather. Okay, so you probably know this. If you get cold, it makes it very difficult to breathe. So if you're in cold weather, make sure that you keep your body warm. 4, do not smoke and stay away from those who smoke. So smoking has lots of chemicals in it that are very, very bad for you, especially when you inhale. But also, if you're around somebody who smokes, when they exhale, that smoke that they blow out is also very dangerous for you too. Stay away from people suffering from the flu or tuberculosis. So if somebody has a cold, try not to be too close to them, keep your distance. Wear masks to avoid breathing in dust and other solid particles in the air. So wear masks when you're outside around dirty traffic, or if you have PM 2.5, wear masks so that you don't breathe in the bad air. But you know this already. And last one, exercise regularly. So again, for all of our system, all of our organs, everything we've ever learned, how to stay healthy, exercise is always mentioned because it is very, very important. Exercise at least 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes a day. So no matter what it is you do, you should do it for at least 3 times per week for 30 minutes, okay? And that will help you. Okay, so I've just realized that I forgot to go over the questions. So we'll go back here. So for page 14, what are the 2 phases of breathing? Very, very easy. 2 phases, breathe in, breathe out. What is the correct word for them? Inhale and exhale. Okay, so inhale and exhale. What happens when we inhale? So that is in detail there. I've said it a couple of times to you already. So it's really important that you remember the process. What happens when we inhale? And then obviously what happens when we exhale? Okay? And then finally, how do we keep our respiratory system healthy? So our respiratory system is extremely important. We need it, we depend on it, so it's important to know how to keep it healthy. So all very, very easy questions this week. So that is all for this chapter. I don't want you to do the exercises that are in the workbook. I just want you to answer the questions in your copybook that I have on this PowerPoint. That's all you need to do, okay? So that is all for this week's class. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you, IP6.